Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
I didn't have a plan B. There was never a plan B for me. I've been saying I'm going to be a vet since I was able to speak. So it was happening. It wasn't, I want to be a vet. It was, I'm going to be a vet. So we took 4 dogs to Turkey and 3 of the 4 cut their paws. The dogs do wear protective boots, but it is one of those things that the handlers have to sort of assess each situation for. Sometimes there's just too much worry they're going to get trapped. We do forget sometimes as pet owners that we have that duty of care. People will forget, despite their best intentions, that walking their dog for half an hour a day is actually not necessarily meeting their requirements and their welfare needs. Just not afraid to hear no. Like even at school, clock that determination, like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I guess I'm quite good at ignoring people.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Victoria, welcome to the podcast. How the hell are you, my love?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be on.
I have been trying to get this conversation, we've tried to be like navigating around each other for, I'll bet, a year. I bet it's longer than that. When did we first meet? Because I think we first met in an UKISAR camp, Kinverston, maybe.
Was it Kinverston or was it Kosovo? It might have been.
No, it was before Kosovo.
Okay, in that case, it was probably nearly 18 months ago. Then,
did you patch my eye up? Was that the first time we had an intimate interaction, or did we know each other before that?
I don't remember patching up your eye.
Do you remember when we were putting those tents up and I wasn't wearing that eye pro and the thing just bounced out and smacked me in my eye? I thought you patched me up for that. I think I was a little bit out of it.
I don't remember that. If that was my first exercise, then it could have happened and everything was just a bit of a blur and I didn't know anyone's names. So I was probably like, what's going on?
I've gotten enormously guilty of going straight into BFF conversation. So for people that are unfamiliar, give us a whistle-stop tour. You are a professional veterinary practitioner in the UK, but give us a little bit around your background and then kind of how you came to be part of UKISAR and the emergency services and how we met, I suppose.
Okay, yeah. So I qualified as a vet from Liverpool in 2006 and had already got a bit of worldwide experience because I love volunteering overseas and working with different species and things like that. So I'd already been working quite a bit with elephants in Thailand. And actually, as I graduated, I went straight back out there and worked out in Thailand with elephants for a few months. But then felt I had to do something sensible in my life and actually earn some money. So came back, worked in general practice overall for 16 years with intermittent volunteering trips overseas to random places. But yeah, when I left general practice, I just finally sort of followed my heart and ended up in the charity sector, working for a charity that looks after working animals in developing countries, so mainly donkeys, working in Africa and Asia and places like that, which was amazing. And then following that, ended up working as a vet surgeon manager for Dogs Trust, which is where I am now. But in the meantime, heard about UKISAR through a colleague that had seen the stand at the emergency services show and came back to work raving about it, saying, there's this dogs and they need a vet. And immediately I was just, right, this involves adventure, this involves travel, this involves hard work. I'm not shy to do some hard work. As he was talking about the selection process with, the hiking and sleep deprivation and things like that. And I was working night shifts at the time, so I was like, well, I've got that, that's fine. Don't mind a bit of hiking and camping. And basically harassed UKISAR for about 5 or 6 years, I think. I went on their website. Well, there isn't a website, is there?
Wow.
Yeah, honestly, this was years ago. So I think it might have been Rob Norman, or was it someone else before that? But yeah, I just found a name on the internet that was linked to UKISAR and just harassed them probably once a year with my CV and do you need a vet? Do you need a vet? And it was always a no, they don't need a vet, because they had someone at the time. And then just before the pandemic, I tried again, my annual harassment, and they were eventually like, actually, we do probably need a vet soon, but it's the pandemic starting. So maybe let's just give it a few months. And that obviously became a few years. And then finally in 2021, I just managed to get back in touch again. I was like, can I start now? And yeah, they finally let me on the team. And then I've obviously had to go through the selection process and things like that. But yeah, I've been joining the training exercises since then, and it's been great.
That is just a beautiful description of perseverance, which is maybe something I want to start with first, because I think, and it's something Rob probably spoken about ad nauseum on the podcast, that the next generation, and I think we can include ourselves in the same generation. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but it's like that aspect of perseverance and people determined to get a profession in something like veterinary, or even just what you've demonstrated there, 6-7 years trying to get involved in the charitable side and ISAR and stuff like that. How long did it take for you to actually train to become a vet?
Well, it's 5 years at uni, but I honestly think the hardest part is getting into uni. Yeah, there's a few more vet schools now than there were when I started, but I didn't get a place when I first applied. The first year of applications I got, that you can apply to 6 unis, and at that stage you could apply to all 6 vet schools. And I got 6 no's. So I was devastated because I didn't have a plan B. There was never a plan B for me. I've been saying I'm going to be a vet since I was able to speak. So it was
Why did you want to be a vet?
I don't remember why. Literally, I made the decision when I was able to talk. Apparently, it wasn't I want to be a vet. It was I'm going to be a vet. I just love animals. Like that's really what it comes down to. I'm just fascinated by them.
I don't think that's rare though. I think a lot of children. I know I wanted to be a vet. I think vet, firefighter, and I think astronaut was on my list as well. And I think most kids have those things, but then I don't know what it is. Like life convinces them not to, or parenthood says, get realistic. Okay, you're in your teenage years now. We actually need to have a bit of a plan. And sometimes it sounds harsh, but like sometimes the parents' unfulfilled dreams can sometimes discourage their children, with the greatest of respect as well. So how did you manage to get through that narrow gap and sustain that ambition and then head into uni?
I was literally obsessed with animals, and I think it is I'm just not afraid to hear no. Like even at school, I was good at science, so that was lucky. But even careers advisors are like, well, you need to have a plan B. Being a vet might not work out. And I was advised not to apply to all 6 unis for vet science. I was advised to apply to at least a couple of other degrees as well. But I just I've got that determination, like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I guess I'm quite good at ignoring people. But yeah, I think that would be a bit of advice from me is just don't be afraid to hear no, and don't be afraid to keep asking. Like that's definitely like what's worked out successful for me, because I went on and I wanted a gap year anyway, so I'd applied for deferred entry. So I just went on my gap year and applied again, and eventually did get an offer from Liverpool again, mostly because I harassed them. They seemed to have a weak spot in that they would reply to emails. So I literally just formed a bond with someone in the admissions team and just kept emailing them. So I think, persistence does pay off. I think I'm evidence of that.
That muscle is weakening as well, though, because I feel like I've got kids and they are less avert or less encouraged to like use their phone for something other than just social media. Like they don't tend to ring people up and they are scared of getting told no. And I just feel like that social interaction has maybe lessened a little bit as well. I mean, you must have people that you work with who are kind of that next generation of veterinary practitioner. Is it still as popular as it was when you first joined? And which kind of direction do you feel like it's heading in? Because when you said 5 years, it probably sounds really harsh and rude of me, but I didn't realize that it's effectively the same amount of education and knowledge you need to assimilate to become a normal human doctor, for want of a better, because it's the same training period, isn't it? I think, and I don't know, I feel like people think veterinary is less studying involved in it because it's just animals or something like that. But actually, the complexity of an animal body and the human body has many correlations, I imagine.
Yeah, so the first year there is a bit of overlap, the physiology and how cells work and things like that is very similar. But yeah, beyond that, it's very different. And I think obviously it's all the different species. So when I was at
Yeah,
uni,
that's the beauty. We're only studying one
yeah.
species, doctors, I suppose.
So I think the difference is as a doctor, not that I know much about that, but I think you still have to go on and do internships and residencies and things like that. Whereas a vet, that's optional. When you graduate, you can just go straight into a GP role, which I
Oh,
think
really?
takes a lot longer for a doctor to do. So I think there's a lot more learning on the job once you qualify as a doctor, whereas a vet is like, off you go, you're done now.
Why is that? Do you think? And maybe we go here now because this was on my list to ask you. Do we inherently just care less about animals than we do about people? Because we say we care more, and I have this conversation with my wife on a regular basis about our horses and our dogs, and they're part of the family, and we call them part of the family. But you did buy it like you would a slave, with the greatest of respect, and it is kind of trapped. You either fence it in at the yard, or we keep our dog trapped in the house, and then we worry that it's going to run off, i.e., escape
Yeah, and live
from
a life of
its
freedom.
imprisoned life. And it's a bit of a weird relationship, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think it's difficult and everyone's different. So you can't necessarily say we care about animals more
No,
because there are definitely people that care about animals more than humans. Um, but yeah, I think we do forget sometimes as pet owners that we have that duty of care. And we do very well at molding the pets that we have into our lifestyle. And so often people will forget, despite their best intentions, that walking their dog for half an hour a day is actually not necessarily meeting their requirements and their welfare needs. Doesn't mean that animal needs to be rehomed or anything. It's just saying, we could do better a lot of the time. So
there's a spectrum of care, isn't there? I suppose.
yeah, and it is minor, but overall, I think in the majority of pets, and I think for me, I find the hardest around pet birds, being caged. I don't like to see that. And we used to have budgies when I was a kid, and I actually loved having them as pets. But yeah, I now don't like seeing caged birds and the little small mammals, like hamsters and things, just seeing them in tiny cages. I find that I personally don't think that's appropriate, even though I do agree that having pets for children is a fantastic experience for them. So I'm kind of in two minds about it. But I think it's just important when you get a pet to consider the overall picture and, are we actually fulfilling their welfare needs or are we just making them fit our lifestyle and, to a slightly acceptable level that in society we see that as okay.
Isn't there something as well, though, inherently unfortunate about humans that if they didn't fit around our lifestyles, and horribly, but they probably just wouldn't exist anymore because the nature of humans is that we are just consuming the earth for better or worse. And I'm sure we've got plans to try and make our relationship with Mother Nature a little bit better. But if something doesn't become a pet of ours or exist around us, it kind of no longer serves an existence. I was trying to get my head the other day when I was having this conversation with somebody around
Uh,
how did dogs and stuff become like man's, but how did we start our relationship with dog? And I know this wasn't on our list of things to discuss. I apologize. We'll get back on topic in a minute, but like just go here for a second. Do you know how dogs became such an
well,
integral part of our life? I've got a theory, but I
yeah.
think you probably know the real one.
Well, I think basically dogs started hanging around because there was food around humans and food waste. So they learned that they could, it was easier than hunting in the wild. So they could just hang around our rubbish bins. And I think it sort of was identified that they served a purpose by keeping away other rodents and actually starting to act as guard dogs as well. But, so people
I
identified
think
they actually had a purpose. And then perhaps they'd actually start putting food out for them. And yeah, I think there was that symbiotic relationship where they kind of accidentally started looking after each other. And then that's obviously developed
they've
over time.
originally been wolves, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah,
Uh,
ancestors were related to wolves. Yeah, so there's a tenuous link there. And so it's crazy. We think of dogs now as breeds, but actually breeds are man-made. That's entirely invented by humans,
yeah.
sometimes to the detriment of that specific breed. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting that we now I think there's nearly 200 breeds registered now, according to owners anyway. So yeah, we've entirely created that. So it is an interesting subject that we could probably talk about for
I
hours.
think and I'll just give my interpretation, and then we'll go on to the next bit. But I think we started because eventually we must have trapped them at some point. I think they've been hanging around the edge of the camp, and we thought we need something to protect us from the bigger stuff like bears and the stuff that kills us. So I'll tell you what, we'll trap this thing, put it on a piece of rope, and have it near the side of the camp, and we'll just feed it stuff. Because hopefully, if something attacks, it'll kill that. It'll either kill that first, and when it barks and makes noise, we'll know the big bear is coming, and we'll all run off. And that was kind of like a survival mechanism. We just put that thing as a first line of defense on the edge of the camp. And then rather than catching one every time we move camp, we just create, like you say, that symbiotic relationship with it and then just take it with us. And we realized it's useful for hunting and other things. But yeah, it's horrible. We just, it served a need for us. But again, I suppose other people would say, well, it's beneficial for the animal because otherwise they wouldn't be around at all anymore. Same, I suppose, with the wild horses and stuff like that. It's a strange one.
And there may well have been people that did that, but I actually wonder if the trapping the dog was necessary. I do think my theory is the dogs approached the humans first because they were getting food and then probably would just follow the humans. So
you
they
think
may not
were the food though? Because wolves, there's stories of wolves still these days, catching children and small babies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they probably came around us because they're like, well, this is food. But yeah, they'd have thought, then maybe they thought at some point, if they don't kill us, we keep throwing scraps out anyway, so they'll just start to exist around us. I much prefer that. Anyway, so take our minds back. You began working with UKISAR 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, around the role that they kind of managed to put together around the realization that they needed to have a veterinary approach to the work that we were doing. Because give people an understanding of what's involved from the canine and animals perspective when it comes to international search and rescue, and what the need was that we eventually realized needed to be filled by a qualified professional such as yourself.
Well, I should say that there was a vet before me who was called Rob, and very sadly, because I know he was much loved by the team, he actually passed away a few years ago, so that was really upsetting for the team. But he had created and he had been on deployment with them, he had created a really good base of veterinary knowledge within the team and had a great system set up, and alongside him there was another vet as well. And so there was already that vet provision, but sadly, because he passed away, I actually never got to meet him, and so there wasn't a handover of knowledge or a handover of processes in that way. And unfortunately, a lot of the process that he had in place were based around his veterinary practice, supplying the drugs and the equipment and things like that. So that all ended as well naturally when he.
I was about to say there's kind of a pro and a con to not having that handover, because with the greatest respect, he'll have done everything with the best of intentions, and I've met him as a wonderful guy, but he was also sat within his own bias, and he will have come from a different generation of veterinary practice, and there will no doubt be some lessons to have learned as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes a fresh approach is also really good. It's always good to have new 100%. Eyes come in. And so I think, I'm not saying it was the right time. I think it would have been great to have met Rob and had that proper handover and everything like that. But yeah, hopefully I can bring a new perspective and new ideas to the team. And certainly one of the main things I've been having to do is look into a more sustainable approach of having the vet drugs and vet equipment maintained, because I'm not planning to leave UKISAR anytime soon, but there's no point me setting up a drug supply from where I work and things like that. It needs to be something that could be maintained indefinitely. So yeah, I've been working really hard on trying to set up a new drugs list of things. Again, I looked at the drugs list they had before, and that's, from my opinion, slightly dated and certainly not necessarily the drugs that I would always run to day to day. But I think it's very personal with vets which drugs they use as well. So it's just modernising the list, making sure that it's available at the drop of a hat, and thinking of all the conditions that we might have to cover in an emergency and what scenarios that might be for.
So when we think of drugs in terms of a standard veterinary practice, I mean, I never actually asked you, how much does it cost to become a vet? Because I have a bunch of people who message in about the emergency services, and they say, I find it really fascinating, but actually I've got an interest in being a doctor, but I just found your podcast really interesting. So we have had a vet on before, Ross the war vet. I don't know if you ever listened to him. He's fascinating. He's an ex-forces guy that then retrained as a vet. But it was colossal, the cost. And I just wanted to, close that loop before I ask you about some of the medications and stuff like that. How much does it cost to become a vet?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure, because when I was at uni, I was really fortunate to miss the massive hike in uni fees.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I think they started going up in my fourth years, but it still wasn't too bad. I think it was still only like £3,000 a year. Whereas now
Okay.
I think it's something along the lines of 16,000 pounds a year, but it's yeah, it could even be more now. So I don't think per year the cost is any more than any other degree, but obviously it's 5 years. So I think it's just a matter of looking at the university fees, and it'll be, I think it's the same across the board, whichever subject you're doing. So yeah, it racks up anyway. And then on top of that, you've got, I think one of the hardest things as a vet student is it's so full on, you don't really get much time to do any part-time work. Whereas I think, when I was in halls of residence and there were people there doing other sort of degrees, and they could go and work in the afternoons in a cafe, or they could get a bar job. There was just, I mean, there were vet students that did it, but I just don't know how they did it. I mean, I was just exhausted all the time. And, you have very little spare time outside of the sort of traditional working hours, but then there's so much studying to do outside of that as well. So, yeah, it's pretty full on. It's quite, so I think it's difficult then to sort of supplement your, to get any sort of income outside of your student loan.
Colossally expensive, I think, for people to try and do it now. So take us back up to ISAR and the nature we do around the dogs. So we have how many dogs? We've got 7 dogs. How many are part of the team
Well,
now?
I think
Do we know? It's okay if we get it
yeah,
wrong.
I think we've got about 7 qualified. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, what's his name he's still going through his qualifications. I
Yeah,
can't
there's
remember his
actually a
name. It's really
couple that should qualify really soon. I can't remember when their grading
okay.
is, but then there's still at least another sort of 4 or even 6 sort of pups in training who are, coming on nicely. So
Has Lindsay
yeah.
just got a lot of Mally, hasn't she?
Yes, yeah, he's already
Yes.
huge. So
Oh,
yeah, so
I
she's.
can't wait to see
And
him. My German Shepherd's 10 months
oh
and he's
wow, so probably
48
enormous
kilos
then.
already.
Oh my
He's
God.
ridiculous. I was just reading a book again yesterday about him going through these growth stages and
Mhm.
he's just getting all these surges of testosterone at the minute. And it's honestly a little bit upsetting for me because he's forgetting all the things that he was so good at before. And I'm
Oh,
blaming myself and blah, 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 blah. But
he's
anyway,
only a teenager.
so we've got 7 or 8 in the team and we've got this training. So when we started to have that realization long ago that we have a physical care that we obviously give to our operators when they become entrapped or have issues and stuff like that. When it comes to preparing the dogs for something like the deployment that you recently went on to Turkey, which we'll go into, what's involved in the provisions of care that we're going to provide for the animals? Run me through that medical checklist in your head for that pre-deployment when we speak about the drugs, the welfare, getting the animals there. It's a mammoth beast of a thing. And I imagine when you're sitting in your practice, just like coming on board with ISAR and looking at what Rob had in the past and then going, wow, okay, well, do I need to consider this and do I need to consider that? And how far down that rabbit hole do I need to go? Because you can't take a whole container worth of a veterinary practice with you.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the main things I'd love to take with me as well would be a veterinary nurse, but can't do that. So yeah, it's a matter of sort of trying to think of all the different scenarios. And like I said, the drugs list I've completely revamped with help from colleagues and also like anaesthetist specialists and things like that, trying to think about, what's the bare minimum we can take. We have looked at different scenarios and actually opted to just use the same provider as the people that look after the drugs for humans, which means we are limited to taking traditionally human drugs. So there's a few things that I normally would use in vet practice that we can't get. So it's thinking of alternatives and how we can work around that. And then also the equipment. So it's, in theory, I would like to be prepared for having to do surgery in the field as well. So having sterilized equipment for that, and trying to think of the most common scenarios are obviously going to be stitch ups, any cuts and scratches, but potentially bigger emergency surgery as well, because these dogs are obviously incredibly valuable, and thankfully that is definitely acknowledged and appreciated within the team as well, and hence that's why I'm here and then my role exists.
It takes longer to train the dogs than it does to train the people. It sounds horrible and we don't wish ill of any people, but we are more replaceable than the dogs. They are very difficult to
Different ways of
train,
looking at
very valuable.
that.
Yeah. But and these are my opinions and no one
Yeah.
else's opinions and ISAR's opinions. But I'm like, and now even having my own puppy and the amount of time I put into that to get a working dog, and also with the greatest respect, just how valuable they are and what they can do, the speed in which they cover rubble piles and search, and they're just super effective pieces of equipment. Sounds horrible, but they are.
Yeah. And we do think of them a bit like that on deployment, but at the end of the day, you know, they're also ultimately pets for the handlers that look after them, who are firefighters. And yeah, much loved by their families and the whole team. So it's a matter of, you know, thinking of what can we do to make sure, first of all, that they're fully trained. And I think the training I'm only partially involved in because I go and help sometimes on their training weekends. But you know, the training is a full-time job basically, and it's preparing them for that kind of environment. So they do train on rubble piles. They travel all over the country to go to different sites to make sure they're exposed to different environments, and all of that is such an important aspect in making sure that they're safe when they're actually in an emergency scenario, because that kind of rubble pile, I mean, you can't completely mimic the sort of disaster that we saw in Turkey, but you can prepare them for like a collapsed building. And these dogs have been flown out to Switzerland recently, and they've been out to Kosovo as well to experience different types of scenario, different types of weather, and all of that just means that when we actually do get deployed, they're actually safer in the first place, which is, from my point of view, obviously reassuring. Because sometimes watching them fly over a collapsed building is absolutely terrifying, but I'm like, they know.
No, and you just see the rebar and the steel and everything sticking out, and you're like, oh, you just feel like there's an impalement about to happen any second.
Yeah, it goes against all my instincts not to just call them off the fire. But yeah, having
like a mother not being able to watch, you're like, no, just please don't, just slow down
exactly.
a bit.
But no, having watched them in training is amazing, because I'm like, they actually are totally fine with this. You know, they're experienced, and the handlers are obviously do a risk assessment every time, and watching them so closely, so they just make it a safe.
They're much more competent than us moving across these rubble piles as well. We're bipedal, whatever, we're rubbish at fumbling all over there. We injure ourselves a lot more than they do.
yeah, probably. It's a good point. Yeah. But I think the key thing for me is like watching the dogs is just how much they love it, you know, because they're trained. It's almost a game for them, really, because they get their favorite toy at the end of it, and so they absolutely love it. Yeah, it means that's part of the reason they're just whizzing so quickly. They know if they find a human that's alive, they're like, amazing, but where's my toy? You know, for them, it's just a big game.
So what drugs do we take? When we talk about, we've alluded to them a couple of times there. What are the standard drugs that we see used in veterinary practices, and what's kind of the bare essentials that you take over with you, and why do we take them?
So the main things are obviously painkillers, but yeah, alongside painkillers, we do take some opioids as well, as another type of painkiller. And then we do take various types of antibiotics, because we know there's going to be different exposures when they cut themselves, different infections. Not ideal, because we obviously try and minimize the use of antibiotics when we can. So generally we're starting off with broad spectrum, because we don't have the facilities to sort of do culture and sensitivity out there. But yeah, we'll take a couple.
You hear that term a lot, don't you? And I for one, I don't really fully understand what it means. When people say broad spectrum antibiotics, does that just mean we're throwing the kitchen sink at something? And is that inherently, if we just jump back into the human world for a second, what leads to some of the challenges with antibiotics becoming less effective?
So broad spectrum means that traditionally that type of antibiotic will cover a wide range of, or a broad range of bacteria. But the worry with that is we use these drugs a lot. And so the more you use an antibiotic, there's a higher risk of the bacteria becoming resistant to it. So when you use a course of antibiotics, you always hear the doctor or vet say, keep going to the end of the course, even if you feel better. Because ultimately, if you finish the course too soon, there will probably be some bacteria left. And they're like, aha, I've resisted this antibiotic. I remember this antibiotic. Next time I see this antibiotic, you're not going to get rid of me. And so that's really a simplified version of how antibiotic resistance develops. So we try and protect those antibiotics and not use them unless we have to, because there's so many other more specific antibiotics where we know that perhaps one antibiotic is generally really effective against a bacteria that's resistant to other types, but we don't want resistance to develop that to that one too, otherwise nothing's going to work in the future. And we're already seeing some diseases like TB that are now resistant to most things. So we just need to protect our use of antibiotics really, and use them properly when we do.
I think we're rubbish at that. I think we're much better in the veterinary world, probably because there's less kind of human emotion. Well, I suppose there's a lot of human emotion from the owners that come in, but ultimately, and I always think of this with food and diet as well, with the way that we feed our dogs. We tend to, if people are not feeding them all this colourful dry food and blah, 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 blah. We won't get into that conversation. But like, we tend to know what not to give a dog and we don't give it to them because it's generally bad for them. Yet with ourselves, we're terrible. And many of our issues and inflammation and diseases come from the fact that we wouldn't treat our pets the way we treat ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it varies, and I think it's something that vets are working on improving at the moment and looking at how we treat conditions. And it is difficult with pets because they can't talk to you. So I think sometimes it is easy to overtreat them just in case. And I think there is a lot of pressure from owners as well. Owners will come in asking for antibiotics for certain things, and so there is a lot of pressure. Perhaps if I didn't, what if it doesn't get better and the owner's going to complain, so there is a lot of pressure on vets about that. So yeah, doing a culture will tell you exactly what bacteria is present, and then the sensitivity testing tells you which antibiotic to use. So that's always the preferred option before prescribing any antibiotics, but obviously we don't have the option for that in the middle of an earthquake zone.
What are the common diseases that we worry about in dogs these days? You mentioned TB for humans and stuff like that. Is there anything? Because we obviously all get all of our vaccinations, and you'll have had to do a million vaccinations for yourself going abroad. And one of the things that people often speak about is rabies, and they always associate that with animals or dogs. But in my very limited interpretation, I thought that had been massively on the decline over the past few decades anyway.
Yeah, so we don't have rabies in the UK. We're really lucky with that, but we do vaccinate all the search dogs for it so that they're prepared for going overseas at any point. In the UK, we vaccinate for things like distemper, hepatitis, parvovirus, parainfluenza, leptospirosis, and
Leptospirosis. Why does that ring a bell? Has there been an outbreak of that recently?
not aware of one, but it can be in humans as well. I think it's called Wheels disease in humans.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I was on a water course recently. That's why, because we worry about catching it from water courses and rats and stuff like that. Apparently, it's quite prevalent.
Yeah, it's spread in urine basically, but it can be transmitted to humans as well. So that's one of the things we vaccinate dogs for. There is a worrying decline of vaccinating dogs at the moment, and I think that's due to the cost of living crisis. People are looking to cut.
Is that also due to bad breeders and people trying to make money punching out puppies and not vaccinating them properly?
Potentially, yeah. I think most people do get their puppies vaccinated, but then people will either forget they need them every year, or they'll think, oh, there's my dog's in a safe environment, it's not exposed to rats, or whatever. So we are potentially going to start seeing more of these diseases in the UK. And then also we are seeing more and more dogs imported. And so when you mentioned bad breeders, not saying that all breeders overseas are bad breeders, but we are seeing more dogs imported, and they're more likely to be from puppy farms and nasty environments. And the worry is there's a lot more diseases in mainland Europe than we have in the UK. So we are potentially seeing, we are already seeing a rise of cases of brucella, which we don't have endemic in the UK, but we are testing. So as I said, my full-time job now is for Dogs Trust, and we do test every dog that.
Yeah, I bet you see not the worst, it sounds horrible, but you see the ones that are neglected or haven't had those vaccinations. People get an issue with their animal and go, either this is too expensive or it's not sustainable, or they just don't want to deal with it. How does that disease manifest itself? How would people see that in their animals?
With brucella in particular, yeah, you wouldn't necessarily know, actually. So that's one of the worrying things about it. And the other main worrying thing about it is it's transmittable to humans, but it's it can cause things like abortion. And those nasty things. So it's most high risk in dogs that have been mated or having puppies, but they can spread it at any time, which is why we always test at Dogs Trust any dog that's come into the UK. And we also test for things like babesia and other tick-borne diseases that we don't have in the UK, not traditionally, and they're spread by things like ticks or sandflies. So we don't have those ticks or sandflies in the UK, thankfully, but it's still something that we need to know about in the dogs that we've got and as pets, and we can try and treat for some of those.
How do we catch diseases from animals? Because when echoing back to the rabies analogy, people always fear that you had to get bitten by something in order to catch the disease. Is that the case? Can people catch these diseases from their animals, from their pets, other than if they're not bitten?
So many different ways. So rabies is spread by saliva. So yeah, generally biting is the main cause of transmission for rabies.
And my dog licks me all the time anyway, though. He's not bitten me yet. Hopefully he won't.
Yeah.
He's really big. But dogs, it's his, it's kind of like a common thing with them. The saliva is everywhere. They're
Yeah.
covered in it.
So
Dogs slobber a
the,
lot.
the more common things to worry about in the UK would be things like the fecal-oral transmission is what you're referring to. So it's if you happen to get some of their feces into your mouth, which sounds disgusting, but if you think he's licking himself,
Could
he
easily
then licks
happen.
his paws, you touch his paws. Yeah. So just general hygiene is the sensible approach, which I'm sure you're doing, clean your hands before preparing food and stuff.
Yeah.
But we do have in the UK things like Giardia, Salmonella, Campylobacter. These are common parasites or organisms that both humans and dogs can get, and it just will cause a general GI upset. So yeah, just if your dog gets an upset tummy at the same time as you, maybe just mention that to your doctor.
Yeah, you know what? I'd never even thought that. Luckily, we haven't experienced anything like that, but I'll certainly keep it in mind, especially with young children as well, because young children, we like it and we want them to befriend the pet in a responsible way. And like you said, there's so many benefits of having an animal when you're younger. It teaches you lots of great disciplines, but you can't be rolling. I see there's a guy, Southend Training as an Instagram page. I don't know if you've seen that gentleman. But he's a great advocate of, being very careful how your children are behaving around your animals, because they tend to do things that the animal really won't like. And then people blame it on aggressive dogs when a child is, poking it in the eye or trying to open its mouth and stuff like this. And then, they blame that the
Yeah.
dog's bitten the child. And you're like, well, it's just ridiculous. I think that's bad
Yeah.
parenting for me. It's not a bad animal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people perhaps are not experienced at identifying those early warning signs in their pet, where perhaps there's an expression that
Giving you
as a
lots of
professional,
indications. Yeah.
yeah, well, you can see the dog is just not happy, and the parent might just think, oh, look, that's cute. But yeah, there are probably early warning signs that I think as a parent and a pet owner, it's sensible to sort of do some research into.
So we spoke about the perfect scenario of being able to take everything abroad and being able to carry out surgeries in the field and stuff like that. What are you ultimately able to take with you? So we've gone through some of the drugs and stuff like that, and we did have, or you sorry, did experience a couple of hopefully minor, but hopefully you'll be able to go into a bit more detail. The injuries that some of the people, but certainly some of the dogs, more importantly in my mind, unfortunately experienced when we've been on different deployments. And I think one of them was injured in Turkey as well, wasn't they?
Yeah, so we took 4 dogs to Turkey, and 3 of the 4 cut their paws. So yeah, they kept me busy with bandaging and things like that. The dogs do wear protective boots, but it is one of those things that the handlers have to sort of assess each situation for. Sometimes there's just too much worry they're going to get trapped. The boot can get trapped or caught on something that can restrict their movement. So it is a matter of assessing the environment. Do they actually need a boot on? They do lose boots regularly as well and come back without them, and a cut paw. So these things happen. So we that's again why the dogs train in that environment, and they train with boots as well. So yeah, 3 of them did manage to cut their paws, but thankfully only 1 required stitching when we were out there. So this was Colin the collie, bless him. And it was a really strange cut, actually, because it was just a laceration along the top of his paw. So I don't know how he must have knocked it on something as he was walking and stepping over something. But it was a very clean incision, thankfully, just through the skin, and didn't go any deeper than that. I wasn't with him at the time. I was in a different work site, but the medic with that group radioed me and we had a chat, and he was happy to bandage it, but he was a bit worried because you could see the tendons underneath the skin had parted, but he was still weight bearing, and actually the dog hadn't even noticed. He was like, why am I not searching? Get off me, I'm busy. But someone had noticed the blood there, so the medic there did a really good job at bandaging him up, and then when we got back to the base camp, I had a look, and he'd done a great bandage, but I cleaned it up again. This was now about 2 a.m, so we bandaged him and gave him some painkillers and things, and some antibiotics, and waited till the morning and then stitched him up the next day. So yeah, we had a little surgical suite going on in the medic's tent. One of the medics stayed and helped me, and there was a couple of other of the team helped as well. So it was a great team effort there. And yeah, after a couple of days rest, it was difficult deciding when to let him go back to work, because at the end of the day, that's why we're there. And, that's 25% of our dog capacity down if he's not working. So I did insist on a full day's rest, but I think it was probably the day after that he was out searching again on light work. So
Mm.
and I was a bit nervous about that, but when I checked the dressing at the end of the day again, his stitches had held nicely, and I was very relieved. So I didn't have to restitch that. But it's just so different to being in normal practice, where you'd be like strict rest for 10 days, no exercise, and
Yeah,
here we are in an earthquake.
yeah.
Like, well, actually, we need to get out there searching. So yeah, let's just put the best bandage on that we can. And I put on as many stitches as I could and some skin glue. So I was like, this is not coming apart.
How do you calm the animals when you carry? Because obviously in the UK you just sedate them, I imagine. But was that did you obviously you took some? Did you take just say you took painkillers? Do you take sedation as well, or
Yeah,
would you?
gave him something else called midazolam as well. We used some local anesthetic as well, and yeah, he was very well behaved. The handlers are great. These dogs are obviously highly trained, so their handlers are great at sort of restraining them when necessary, things like that.
Love that. So talk to me about the complexity of getting them out there for a second, because I know just listening to the team and the crates and the travel expectations, and sometimes they go on the planes and off the planes, and how hard is it to be able to get these animals into these deployment zones?
Yeah, that is probably my biggest stress with any deployment. When I hear there's been an earthquake, probably the first thing I'll do is Google how to get a dog to that country, and more importantly, get it back, actually, because that's usually the harder
Yeah.
part. Getting them out there, they will have to have a fit to fly certificate, so that's something that I can do at the point of departure. So I've always got some of those printed out ready to go, and that's just a general health check. I'll check all of their vaccines are up to date, which is something that I monitor regularly anyway, specifically their rabies, and check their microchips are working. So we can make sure that if they go through airport control, that all of their paperwork's in order. Normally you'd have to have, depending on which country you're going to, if it's in the EU, you can use an animal health certificate. There's other certificates for countries outside of the EU that are much more difficult to get hold of. So fortunately, we do have the luxury when we're actually on deployment of everyone wants to get us out there. So we do have a lot more support than if we're just going on holiday, basically. Sometimes the training exercises, like we went to Switzerland or Kosovo, was particularly hard because they drove and I had to factor in every country they were going through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was loads of checkpoints that they
Yeah.
had to go through, and
Yeah. So
everyone required their own little special manifest of certificates.
Exactly. And so yeah, I had to sort of speak to multiple embassies trying to figure out how I was going to get the countries through the dogs through those countries. But
And
yeah,
again, for different countries, they actually prioritize animals a lot less, don't they? So for some of them, it'll probably be really hard to get them pushed through because they probably put you to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, potentially. Fortunately, that all went very smoothly in the end for Kosovo. But because we actually chartered a flight for Turkey, that was actually much more straightforward. And yeah, with the fit to fly certificate, that was accepted by the airline. So it does depend a little bit on the airline that you're going with, and they luckily allowed the dogs to come in the cabin with us, and actually the dogs were given first class, so they had more space.
I was about to ask that because some people, well, I've had people ask me, how do the dogs travel? Are they in the cargo bay? What if you need to go on a ferry? Are they just allowed to sit in the cabins? Do they have to wear seatbelts? Questions that we would think silly because you've seen what happens yourself, but actually it's a very fair point.
Yeah, and it really depends on the airline or the transport provider at the end of the day. So we have to follow their requirements. But yeah, fortunately, so far when the dogs have flown, in my time anyway, we've been able to put them in the hold with us, which is amazing. I know in the past, a long time ago, the dogs used to. I guess they went in the hold, but I know that they have done quarantine in the past when they've got back. So that's something that I want to try and avoid happening in the future. In fact, there was one dog that ended up.
Why? Just to make sure they have no diseases?
Yeah, so this was pre the pet passport sort of era. And so that was just standard. If you've been out of UK, you have to come back and do quarantine in the UK. So that was really hard for that. One dog did it twice, in fact, because she was deployed twice. So yeah, I did a whole year in quarantine overall, which was a real shame. So that's something that I really want to avoid. Obviously, that would be really upsetting for everyone.
How long is the quarantine? Sorry.
It's usually 6 months. I actually think it might have been.
Bloody hell. I literally had 10 days in my head. I don't know why I had 10 days. I suppose I've had something embedded with me from COVID. Quarantine is 6 months.
6 months, but I think now with dogs that have got their rabies vaccination and paperwork, it can be less. But I would have to double check, and it probably depends on which country and things like that as well.
What does quarantine mean? in terms of their limitations of their life?
So it's basically, if you've ever been to any boarding kennels, it's like that, but they have to have two locked doors between them and the outside world at any point, if not three, actually. Two locked doors and a
Well,
gate.
so you can never take your dog out for 6 months?
No, no. So there will be some sort of exercise area.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, but it's very confined. You can go and visit your dog.
That's got to be very detrimental to the animal's behavior as well, and its ability to train and even sustain an operational readiness.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's a massive part of a dog's life. When you think a working dog's life, in theory, could be from the age of 2 to 8. It's only 6 years. So if you're taking out 6 months, or in that case, a whole year out of that, it is a massive loss of resources for the team for a start, but also all the training that you've put into that, you're going to have to refresh when the dog comes out. So yeah, we definitely want to avoid that.
So it might be an appropriate time to just take me into responsible pet ownership when it comes to traveling and stuff like that. When you have people come to your veterinary practice and speak about, I've just got a puppy, I'm a really active person, I like to travel a lot, blah blah blah. What should they be looking to do as a responsible pet owner?
Well, the first thing is just chat to your vet, but the vet will tell you, make sure the dog's got his microchip, which it should anyway, it's a legal requirement. Make sure that's working, and make sure it's got a rabies vaccine. Those are the sort of key things. But it does depend which country you're going to. Most people in England are off to France or somewhere in the EU, which is fairly straightforward. You can get at what's called an animal health certificate. It is quite difficult to get appointments for that. They generally take about an hour to complete, and they're quite expensive to do. But once you have to do it within 10 days of your journey. So you just have to book that quite close to your trip. But then once you enter the EU, it then is valid for 4 months throughout any country in the EU and for re-entry into the UK. The main thing on the return to the UK is a vet in the country that you're just about to leave, probably France, has to do worming within 24 to 120 hours before you come back into the UK. And that's again because they've got some parasites over there that we don't have in the UK. So important to get that done on your return journey.
How can you check if your dog is actually microchipped? Because I've told that ours is, and obviously it gets checked to the vets. But is there actually any way for me to do it myself? We're not at the point in technology yet where I can scan anything, can I?
Not with your phone, unfortunately. That would be amazing. But you can buy a
like...
microchip scanner. They're available online. There's different types of chips. So some scanners won't pick up every chip. But yeah, I suspect your pet's probably got one that's a generic one. So you can get your own scanner, or you can just ask your vet to scan it next time you're there. It's probably a more sensible thing to do.
So talk to me then, because it might be a nice transition. The first time we went to Kosovo together, we were kind of lucky enough, but also now on reflection, well, I don't know, but I can only imagine the challenge that you were kind of having mentally. Because when we went over there and amongst the rubble pile, there was a whole bunch of dogs, and in Kosovo, their relationship with their dogs in this one isolated example, and I'm sure it's not a generalization of how they all treat their animals, but we were told by many of the soldiers and some of the people that work there that the relationship with the animals locally is a bit detached. Some people don't like them at all. There's many instances of people just running over them with their cars, kicking them out of the way. And there was also a bunch of puppies in the rubble pile that we came across. And you were kind of in that mental battle whilst we were there of trying to do a few checks on dogs, and there was like a big welfare muscle I saw bulging out of you that you wanted to just look after them all. But talk to me about your experiences with that. Obviously, you've done a lot of stuff in the past, the elephants and the donkeys, so your awareness of international care of animals is certainly far beyond anybody else I know. But talk to me about how that was.
Yeah, it's different in different cultures, isn't it? How people perceive animals. And I think in the UK, well, and more, what's classed as the developing world, we do embrace pets and have that sort of inherent love of having them in our homes with us and nurturing them. Whereas in other countries, that's not necessarily the case in all places. So yeah, in Kosovo, we were staying on the military training base, weren't we? So there was a lot of other people around, a lot of stray dogs, although I say stray, but there were some that had names because they're regularly there and being fed and things like that.
There was one that had been kind of homed with one of the hosts that we were with, but again, bless him, he just kind of done it because he built a relationship with it, and I think you put in some great advice with that one as well.
Yeah, so she needed her anal glands emptying, so I did that while I was there, poor thing. But yeah, I think it was her mum that had the litter of puppies as well. So but the host, like you said, he's actually a British guy. he couldn't even bring himself to go and see the puppies because he didn't want to fall in love with them, because he knew he would end up bringing them all inside and rearing them. So
I've still got that little video of them. There was like 5 or
I
6,
think there
wasn't
were
there, in the
more.
back of that
Yeah, it
rubble
could have even
pile?
been 8 or 9. But yeah, we made a little bed for them. We found lots of blankets because they were just literally lying on concrete. But they were, probably a week or so old and doing well. They looked healthy. So the mum was really skinny, but she was being fed around the back of the kitchens as well. So we gave her a bit of extra food. And I actually went back to Kosovo later in the year, and they were all doing well. I think one had passed away because it got trapped in the rebar, but the others had all survived and actually been rehomed. And I say rehomed, I think one of the saddest things for me when we were driving around the region is seeing a lot of the homes had a dog tied up in their garden, and was clearly just a guard dog. But I felt I don't know, but it just looked like they never had any freedom. They were constantly just chained up at this kennel in the garden. So they barked when people went by. And that's quite sad to see. They're not getting much exercise. They're not interacting with any other dogs, and they're really restricted. So yeah, I think it's quite common out there to have a pet guard dog, if you can call it that. But I do think their welfare is not perfect.
I think it takes us back to that primitive analogy that I kind of fumbled my way through trying to describe. I think it's gotten back to that point, which is really quite unfortunate, and it's just perhaps a sad state of affair of their economy over there.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Or it's just a status symbol as well, I think, to have a guard dog like that. Yeah. And, these puppies probably were free or a small donation. So, why wouldn't you take one? You just chain it up in your garden and that's that. But yeah, that's sad to see. But I think, there is a lot of work being done. And in fact, Dogs Trust work in that region, not in Kosovo that I'm aware of, but certainly in Bosnia, and looking into going to Serbia as well. So it's a matter of education, population control, and things like that. So there's a lot that can be done.
I was about to say population control, because this is one thing Ross spoke to us about when he was on the podcast, because he spoke about he'd been deployed to Iraq as a soldier on a couple of occasions. Then he come back, retrained as a vet, and went back out there to do some humanitarian work as a vet. And it was a very thankless task on retrospect. He'd done a lot of great work, and he'd been able to organize some containers locally where the dogs could be housed and cared for, and a large compound caged area where he could go in and check on them all. When someone had been injured, he'd take them in from strays, get them back up to healthy again. But then the process of, like you said, trying to rehome them or try and find a place for some of these dogs, he said it was up to a point where he'd come back on the second occasion and many of them had just been put to death because it was considered the more humanitarian way of doing it, and also the population control, because some of them were considered pests if there was a pack of dogs. And I remember when we were over there, I actually saw a couple of packs of dogs just chasing trains and stuff, and I thought, as cute and funny as that is when you're driving past, that may be quite a scary thing to encounter if you are a local living in that area, a pack of wild dogs.
Yeah, and I'm sure it is, and unfortunately there are instances where people get bitten by dogs, and there will be rabies in the area as well. So I don't know so much about in Kosovo, but certainly in more developing countries, children are told to be afraid of dogs because of rabies, because it's such a big concern. And so it's quite common for people in certain cultures to be raised being scared of dogs and not wanting to be around dogs. And you can see why when there is that risk of rabies. So, there are loads of campaigns trying to, well, it should be possible to eliminate rabies from the world, because it's something that we can vaccinate for. We're vaccinating dogs as well, and there's actually a charity called Mission Rabies, and that is actually their goal. So it's something that is being worked on. But within that, once we can ease people's concerns about rabies, then you can start to introduce, you don't have to be scared of the dogs anymore. It's fine to allow them to approach you and things like that, and have that better relationship. But yeah, it goes hand in hand, and a lot of the charity work that goes on overseas is what's called a capture, neuter, vaccinate and release program, because it's actually important to release them back into the same area. Otherwise, you'll just get other dogs coming in. There will always be more dogs. Some countries or cities will use shooting dogs as a way of population control. But it doesn't work, because once you've killed those dogs, more dogs will just come in. What you need to do is actually neuter them, vaccinate them for rabies, and put them back, and they will actually prevent other dogs coming in, and it's a safer population then.
Yeah, even that though in itself would sound cold to people, because you're neutering it, i.e., spaying the animal, making it unable to reproduce. But again, what's the alternative? We're inundated with animals that have these diseases, and it will ultimately spread itself into the human population at some point.
Yeah, and when you've got such a high population number, obviously they're competing for food resources and things like that. So yeah, it's for their own welfare as well. You'll get a healthier population overall.
How did you find the entire deployment to Turkey? So this was your first massive deployment, unless I'm wrong, please correct me, of course. But when you first got the information in about that, how did you deal with it? The aspect of this is real, we're really going this time, and the sheer magnitude of what had happened.
Yeah, I think the first thing was, you wake up. I've got the GDAX alert on my phone, so I knew there'd been an earthquake when I woke up. But we'd had a few false starts before. There was a couple of other things in the last few years where it's like, we might be getting deployed, but let's wait and see. And they've not happened. So I was a bit like, oh, it probably won't come to anything. Started working as normal. I was just working at home that day, which was lucky. And yeah, then it suddenly all kicked off. There was a lot of emails and WhatsApps going on, and I was working but keeping an eye on my phone. And then suddenly at midday, it was like, oh, we're going. Oh, this is actually happening. I better start packing. And then I think it just sort of went into, it really did feel like the same as the training exercise. It was very similar motions. There was obviously a greater sense of urgency, but, at the point of departure, the atmosphere was, slightly more tense, but overall it was like, okay, we've done this before with the training. So it made me realize, the stuff that they do put into the training exercises is all relevant, that hurry up and wait, checking your passports, your medical checks, things like that. For me, I had to check over all the dogs and do their fit to fly certificates. I spent ages trying to scan all their documents because the scanner wasn't working. So that was a massive headache. So yeah, I was just spent a lot of time doing paperwork really. But yeah, at the same time, it all was similar to what we've done for exercises. And yeah, I was looking into sort of the risk assessment for the dogs, any risks out in the country that they needed to be aware of. Obviously, there is rabies there as one of the things. But any other infectious diseases they might get access to. We do obviously get a safety and security brief from the safety and security officer anyway. So extrapolating that for the dogs, one of my concerns was because we were quite close to the border with Syria, there are still unexposed mines in some areas. And it is more likely that the dogs are going to be running off into different areas. So, obviously flagged anything like that to the canine handlers. And yeah, that was all sort of a bit hectic, but then got to the airport in the middle of the night, tried to get some sleep on the floor of the airport. Didn't really work very well. And yeah, when we arrived again, it was very similar to being on exercise, and setting up the base of operations. We've all done that multiple times now, so it was really efficient and got all the tents up. And yeah, I think it was only as we started then to be driven into the city that we were going to start our rescue missions that it all sort of sinks in. And one of the hardest things was the traffic was just awful. I think either people were trying to flee the city or they were trying to provide aid, and it was just complete chaos. I mean, the traffic signals were just being ignored. It took us ages to get into town, which was quite frustrating because we were ready to go. Yeah, we sort of walked our search area to sort of get a view of the sort of the lay of the land, and that was quite eye-opening because you just could see, the expressions on everyone's faces. And we obviously stood out as a search and rescue team with all our PPE on and everything like that.
Gear and our oranges and everything like that.
Yeah. Had a few people sort of approach us as well. And then when we started our search area, it was actually, we were relying at that stage a lot on just asking locals, do you know anyone that's still trapped in this area? And actually, really quickly, I think within the first few hours, we did find some people they said, oh, there is a lady trapped on the second floor here. So really quickly, we actually managed to rescue this, I think she was 91 years old or something, this lady. And, the team got her down using a stretcher down a ladder from the crack in the front wall of the house. And yeah, I think the fact that, and amazingly managed to hail an ambulance down straight away because the traffic, like I said, was so bad, but then there wasn't an ambulance there. I was like, oh, that's unexpectedly convenient. And yeah, that just gave everyone such a good feeling, like we made our first rescue, and we're like, right, next, like let's get another one. And yeah, it was just such a fantastic feeling. And from there, we heard the other teams had made a rescue or a find as well. And it's just that morale just stayed throughout the whole deployment, because there were some really challenging rescues, and obviously the team saw some horrific things that they won't forget. But ultimately, the successes that we had sort of, well, certainly for me, are the things that I remember the most. And that morale of everyone just being like, yeah, we've done it, okay, and we found some more people, let's go. And the teamwork and the team spirit were just amazing, and I think that's kind of what carried us through it.
Isn't it really crazy though how that before we came on, we spoke about, and you said there about the bad experiences and how challenging it will have been for some of the things that people have seen. But before we came on, we were speaking about how we frame them as bad experiences. And that's not to say that we didn't enjoy them or weren't grateful for them. And enjoy probably seems like a morbid word for some people, but those experiences were going to happen irrespective. Do you know what I mean? We can't, control the controllables. We can't control the natural disasters. We can't control the things that happen. And these things are happening every day. Like I've said to people before, go onto GDAX and have a look at even some of the floods or the disease outbreaks or the heat waves or things that we are not getting deployed to, but are still happening in the world. And if you frame it in that way, it almost is like a strange privilege to be able to utilize Victoria's skill sets, as unique as they are, and everyone else's with their own different complexities of their skill sets and things like that, to be able to, come to the aid of people in a massive time of need. How did that feel, knowing that there's a million vets in the world? And I'm sure there was perhaps others in country doing different work as well, and around the world doing amazing work, but you had managed through perseverance and not taking no for an answer and keep pushing yourself to be able to be in such a privileged position to add value in such a unique way.
Yeah, it is a weird experience and a weird feeling afterwards. And we were talking earlier about things like survivor guilt, weren't we? Because not that I'm calling myself a survivor at all, but it is completely by chance that people are caught up in this, and it's our privilege that we were born in the UK and not on a earthquake map, basically. So
blind luck.
Yeah, completely by luck. And for me, one of the reasons I've chosen to do more charity work and increasingly more humanitarian work as well is that for me, we're just all humans. Like, I don't understand this division of, this is my country, this is not your country, this is a border that is being created by us.
We just invented it at some point and drew an imaginary line out of our own power and ego on this big map that we created.
Yeah, we're all living on the same planet. We all need to look after the planet and each other. And I think to have the opportunity to go out and actually help people from my planet that were just more unfortunate than I am, it was a privilege to be able to do that. And I just think it's hard to say it was a great experience to be there, but it was great to have that 100%. Opportunity. And you see things like this on the news all the time, and like, you just feel really helpless, don't you? And actually be able to do something was very rewarding. And to actually meet these people and talk to them, and there was a language barrier, but you could just tell they were incredibly grateful to have us out there, which was amazing.
How have you dealt with the transition coming home? And I think of this often with the emergency services, like the massive sort of spectrum of people's perceived tragedy or disaster, or I always think the worst thing that's happening to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Do you know what I mean? So for you, the worst thing might be you've crashed your car or you stubbed your toe. But as you go and experience different things like this, your spectrum goes wider, which doesn't mean you care less about what then you may perceive as the trivialities of somebody else's life back in the UK and the challenges and disasters that they're, dealing with in their own different world. But how have you dealt with transitioning back to the UK, having seen what you've seen, and then trying to sustain empathy and sympathy with some of the challenges that are happening here and not almost become cold and detached? Because empathy exhaustion is a very real thing in the emergency services. People struggle talking to their partner or their friend about something bad that's happening in their life, and you're like, I've just seen someone unable to pull their dead mother out of a rubble pile, and I'm trying to connect with you on the fact that you didn't get that promotion. Do you know what I mean? And it's very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I totally get your point, and it's easy to see to be like, oh, I mean, you can put it in all different perspective as well. You know, when people are like, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm starving, I haven't eaten since. So it's like, well, you're not starving, are you? Because, you know, you've actually got a fridge full of food. So yeah, it comes into all aspects of our life, really. And yeah, I totally understand that, and it affects the veterinary profession a lot, as well as compassion fatigue. You know, you can exhaust yourself being compassionate all the time for pets and their owners. So yeah, it's something that the profession has to battle with in a similar way, probably, to the fire service. So yeah, I think traveling is, in my opinion, the biggest way to open your mind. And you know, anyone that, not that anyone ever admits to being narrow-minded, but anyone that is narrow-minded should
we all are, unknowingly.
Yeah. And I think it does open your mind to so many different things, especially when you're seeing people go through some sort of disaster like we did in Turkey. But I think people's struggles are not comparable. Like, you can't say that anyone's struggle or pain is worse than anyone else's, because for them at that moment, it's so pivotal to their life. And whether it's not getting a promotion, or, like you say, stubbing their toe, or
that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. I always think of my children like this. Like, the worst thing that's ever happened to my daughter is the worst thing that's ever happened to her, and to her, that is where her spectrum finishes at the minute. And that is the world. The sky is falling. Do you know what I mean? That's her world over.
Yeah. And I think just because theirs is, perhaps you could perceive it as a slightly less terrifying or disastrous thing as someone's family dying in an earthquake, it's still important to them right now, and I think it's still valid. And you shouldn't ever really minimize someone's struggles or concerns at that time, because it's still very relevant to them at that moment. So yeah, it's just keeping that perspective as well. But yeah, it's very easy to do and just be like, why are you complaining about that? But yeah, for them, it's a big deal at that moment, and you shouldn't really compare, I think.
What I would love to just ask you about is, because we are getting such a wide spectrum of skill sets being recognized as essential in things like international search and rescue, from veterinary practice to structural engineers to medics, to a wide variety of skill sets that we now take with us on these deployments. For fire and rescue services personnel, it is a bit easier, with the greatest respect, because their pay is backfilled by their fire service, and we have a very close relationship because it's a rescue organization. For people who are structural engineers, medics, doctors, vets, how did it work for you, if you're happy to share? Like, because people may want to come and do the things that you're doing, you know, and I hope to see more people applying and getting involved with international search and rescue and other charities and organizations, but they may feel like, that's not sustainable for me. I'm really struggling as it is. I want to do more, but I don't know how I would. How did it work for you? And like, how easy would it be for people to try and navigate a similar, perhaps, opportunity for themselves?
Yeah. So when I started with ISAR, I was actually locuming. So I was just doing shift cover when I was needed, and I could arrange my own rota and just take shifts that I was available for. So it was quite easy for me to just join most of the training exercises, really, and work my shifts around that. It was just after the pandemic, so there wasn't really a lot else going on. So it's actually a great opportunity for me to meet new people and do some, even though it was hard work, you know, still socializing, really, and meeting new people was really nice. And since then, now I've been working at Dogs Trust. So I do use probably about 10 days a year of my annual leave to join ISAR on training exercises. So it is definitely a commitment that, you know, anyone volunteering outside of the fire service has to consider, is how much of your own time are you willing to dedicate to this? You know, I certainly want to join at least 2 exercises a year, because, well, especially now I've been deployed, you know, seeing the benefit of that, and being familiar with that setup, being in the boo, how the whole process works, making myself useful as best I can within the boo as well when the dogs are healthy. You know, I find that so useful. So they're usually between 3 and 5 days each, aren't they? So you know, that's sort of at least 6 days gone. And then I also like to try and join the canine training sessions as well, which I do at least 4 times a year. So I don't have to, but, you know, I like to go check the dogs over, help them with their training. I like to
build that relationship as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And get to know the dogs better and the handlers, you know, builds that relationship. I like volunteering to hide for the dogs, because obviously they have to search for a
Yeah.
human. That is what they're training to do. So yeah, to see their little faces when they find me, and they get really excited. I love that. So it's not completely selfless.
I've found some people have been really surprised at how scary that can be sometimes. And
Yeah.
I say scary because the dogs are trained to run up, stand about an inch away from your face, and bark like mad.
Yeah.
And if you've got one of the mallet, I mean, mix, I love mixed mallies.
Yeah.
Oh, I forget what's her name.
He's got two, Cara and Luna.
Oh, Kara's my favorite. Have you got a favorite? You know, you've got to tell me. Have you got
No,
one
of
of the
course I don't
favorite
have a
dogs?
favorite. No, I love them all
Come
equally.
on.
No, I honestly.
I love Lindsay's got a little spaniel as well.
Little
What's her
Davy,
name?
he's the ISAR dog. Yeah, he's got another
Yeah,
spaniel called Louis, but he's a cadaver dog.
they're one of my favorites, I
Yeah.
think. But yeah, that can be quite scary for people. They didn't realize that when they actually run up and find you, and you just sort of freeze because they're this big, strong dog straight in front of you, barking his head
Yeah,
off.
I often get videos of them so that it's really useful actually to show the handlers what they're doing in their search processes, because often the handlers can't see them at this point. They're often out of sight.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the videos sometimes, there's literally saliva flying everywhere. One of the dogs, they've all got a slightly different style, but one of them, Sid, the Labrador, is John's dog.
Yeah.
He loves to sort of stick his nose in you first. He really likes to make sure that he's found a human, and he literally will slobber all over your chest and face and then start barking. And yeah, some of the mallies, they especially the mallies, they just look so fierce, and they're literally, like you say, a few inches from your face. And I've got a few videos which when I've shown people, they're like, oh my god, like you must think it's lucky for me that I
Yeah.
know these dogs. I know exactly what they're doing, and I know they're not going to hurt me. They just want their toy, basically. But if you didn't know that, it would be quite scary. But at the same time, you'd be so relieved that you've been found. Well, unless you're a criminal.
That's why I think they're also a positive reinforcement for like how healthy dogs can be and how like positive relationships dogs can be if they're trained correctly. Sorry, like because there's so many poor examples on social media of horrible, angry, untrained dogs that when people do see animals that you work with that are well cared for, really well trained, actually they have tremendous relationships with people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, these dogs might look scary, but just because they're barking, it doesn't mean they're going to try and bite you at all. And I think, learning about dog behavior and dog language is just fascinating. And yeah, for me, yeah, that's one of the reasons I love going on these canine training sessions as well.
I want to be super respectful of your time. So before we wrap it up, I just wanted to ask you, from all your experiences and things you've done, the opportunities that it's offered you, would you do it again? Would you train to be a veterinary practitioner? And some people have said no in the past. When I've asked them questions, they've gone, well, they've said yes, but maybe I do it differently because it's a super valuable thing. And as a pet owner, I am only recently with the horses and the dogs becoming aware of how essential your work is. But I don't pretend for 1 second that it's easy.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a tough job being a vet. I think it's underestimated actually how hard it is, and it's really underpaid as well, which I think a lot of people don't realise. I think they're assuming we're paid the same as doctors, which we're not. Not saying that all doctors get paid a lot either, but yeah, I think I love being a vet. I'm really proud of being a vet, so I would definitely do that again. But perhaps for me, I may have, if I'd realised how much I wanted to be in the charity sector and actually how many opportunities there are in the charity sector, which I wasn't aware of when I first graduated, then I probably would have gone on and done something else as well, or maybe alongside work. You could do a part-time master's or something like that. I would have loved to have, and it's obviously not too late, but I don't know how I'd feel about studying again, but doing something like international relations and different aspects of community development and things like that. I think a more humanitarian aspect, I think that's probably surprised me in my later years, how much interest I still have in that, and actually how you can extrapolate your veterinary skills into humanitarian work as well. And I think now for vets these days, it is more known how many other opportunities there are out there, but there's still more could be done to improve people's knowledge of that. And I think certainly in the charity sector, public health sector, research development, pharmaceuticals, there's so much more that vets can do now that when I graduated, I was like, well, I just think I'll be in a clinic for the rest of my life. And, ultimately for me, that wasn't fulfilling enough. For some people, they love it. But, for me, I found, the routine became mundane, and even when the emergency was
100%.
becoming mundane, it's
Yeah,
like, okay, I
yeah.
need to do something different. So
Every 2 years, I try and change what I do, and I
yeah.
never thought when I was a kid that I thought once I became the thing, like owned a gym or became a firefighter, whatever the ambition was, I thought that'd be it. But it's always like kind of that false summit as well, because then once you get there, you
Mm,
start to see other things and other
yeah.
opportunities. What would you say to Victoria at 17? Because we do get, surprising to me, because I'm a boring old guy now, I think we get quite a lot of young people message the podcast and ask about how to get into this sector, how to get into that sector, or I'm really interested. They hear something from a guest, and then I always reflect back and I'm frustrated at myself because I didn't ask the guest, because I'm like, well, I'm not the best person to ask. You'd be better off asking them. So I'll ask you now,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to that 17 or 18-year-old, young girl about to head into her studies? She has a passion for veterinary, but she doesn't know what the best way to go. I mean, she could just wander into the local clinic, but like you said, then that kind of shrinks your perception of what the opportunities are out there.
Yeah, I think, first of all, when I was 17, I'd already been volunteering at vet practices for 3 years, because I started that when I was
Oh,
14.
okay.
And yeah, and also volunteering at as many different species of farms. And, I volunteered at Swan Sanctuary, milking
Yeah.
cows, working at stables, helping in lambing on lambing season, just get involved in as many different things as you can. For me, I didn't really know at that age that I wanted to be in the charity sector. So yeah, it's sort of naturally evolved for me. But I think, yeah, if just expose yourself to as much as possible. And like I said at the very beginning, don't be afraid to hear no, and don't be afraid to keep
Mhm.
asking as well. So just keep trying different things. And, if you
I
do
always
become
say
a
no
vet
is a
and
comma, not a full stop. No is no right now.
yeah,
It's not no forever, because
exactly.
next week it might have
Or
changed.
not yet, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think if you do become a vet and find that clinic work isn't for you, there's just so many more opportunities for vets now. And I think just keep exploring, do overseas voluntary work. It's just it's so eye-opening, even if you don't end up in the charity sector. I just think it's such an amazing experience. So, yeah, just get out there volunteering and speak to different people. There's loads of networks as well.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. I know we've tried for a little while to get it together, and we're so busy, the both of us. So it's a Saturday morning for people that are not aware. And I appreciate you giving it your time. I know you've got a lovely day planned in. It's a beautiful sunshine outside as well. So I will let you go. But if people did want to reach out either via social media or email, what's the best way for people if they have a few more questions?
So probably the best way would be on LinkedIn. You've got the LinkedIn address, and it's Dr. Victoria Phillips. Is how you can
I'll
find me
put
on
it in the
LinkedIn.
notes.
Yeah,
We'll put a
that's
notes
fine.
to
It's
it so
Phillips with
people
two
can
L's.
do that.
But yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. And yeah, obviously they can contact you if they can't get hold of me that way. That'll be fine.
Perfect. I won't give your phone number out. Don't worry. I've never got in trouble with that in the past, and I will not start a habit of it now. But yeah, thanks so much for that. Send my love
That's
to the
been a
family and
pleasure. Thanks for
everybody, and
inviting
I
me on.
cannot
Yeah.
wait to see you again soon at one of the deployments.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be too long now.
Firefighters podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.